And this is just across the street on the south side, on the southeast corner of Hink Street, where Anderson's store is presently located.
Yeah. Now, I think for the viewers there, the long part of that building is what's going down Hink Street.
Yes.
And then the front of the building is on Talbot. And that was built in the 1870s.
1871.
Yeah, when Hagars came here, and they made steam engines, farm implements. They made a very wide...
water mains.
Water, yes. Didn't they produce all the pipe and machinery for the first water system?
In St. Thomas and Brantford, I think.
Yeah. And
I think they had a parent plant in Brampton.
Yeah.
And the Haggards and the Cochrans were connected.
Well, that came later. First was the Hagars Brothers, and then Cochrane becomes associated with it. And both Hagars Brothers in St. Thomas and the McPherson foundry in Fingal made a lot of complicated machinery. And then the Erie Iron, which maybe wasn't called the Erie Iron then, was also making machinery. And but they couldn't meet the competition of Massey and Harris and Cockshut. The bigger firms gradually drove all these small foundries and implement manufacturers out of business.
Yeah.
And then, again, we haven't checked when that company ended, but that building was vacant for several years.
Around the turn of the century,
Yeah.
I think.
And somebody suggested that a good use for it would be to move all the municipal offices into it. This is before the city hall was built.
Oh, yeah.
And they thought that would be a good use for the building. Well, then R.M. Anderson, who had started business here in '96, moved in there when? In the early 1900s?
Yeah, I don't know what year exactly.
And they bought the building and moved their store in there. And now they must have taken that mansard roof off.
I'm not just sure what. I don't think they're quite clear on it themselves right now.
Well, that must have happened in the early 1900s. The mansard roof was taken off, and all the brick in that building. There was an editorial in the paper when Haggards came that they couldn't get brick very cheap, and I think they got brick from McIntyre out on the River Road. And he had a big brickworks there, and he supplied all the brick for that.
I'd never heard of him.
Yeah, well, he also supplied the brick for the Presbyterian Church.
Oh, I see.
And I forget how much it was.
Well, he must have been going over that period, 71 to 83.
Yes,
then.
yes, he was. He was, and there again, there's just one little thing left of his building out on Begg's Farm there. But take a good look at that. People are watching it. That's where Anderson's is today. And except the mansard roof has been taken off and windows have been put along the front. But that was a pretty prominent manufacturing establishment in St. Thomas, and did a wide variety of metalwork and entered engines in competitions and the fairs, provincial exhibition at Toronto and so on.
This is further down Talbot Street, the same block on the south side where the present Hepburn Park is. And this was, well, in later years it was the Charlie Wong's laundry, but it was originally built as the first separate school in St. Thomas. And it was located down by the Catholic Church and later moved up to this location.
Well, now, Don, that's what I'd like to wonder. Are you sure about that? That it was built first up by the church and then moved up?
Yes.
You are, eh?
Yeah, I'm quite sure that
I've never seen any documentation for that. And I've always been interested in knowing, because sometimes the Catholics in St. Thomas didn't run a separate school. The odd time they sent all their children to the public school system down on Wellington.
This church would have been built in 1830, I believe.
This building?
Yeah, 30 or thereabouts, and it went till about 1840.
Yeah.
And I don't believe there was a separate school in St. Thomas from 1840 to 1870.
No. Well, there again, the government just started keeping records, annual reports of separate schools and so on. I have one for 53 in which it's listed as a separate school. But
in 1853 it was.
Well, I think that's when it was, and it said that
Well, there wasn't one when Father Flannery came to St. Thomas in 1870.
Well, it may have not been operating. They may have been sending them to the public system then.
Yeah.
And then he was a great builder. And,
Shortly after he came, within a year, they had a separate school.
yeah.
Now, this is down on Southwick Street, our old fire hall on the west side of Southwick Street. It was built in 1881. And a very fine building. It was there until about 1973, 4.
You know, what do you do with buildings like that? It was elegant. Well, first they took the tower down, didn't they?
First they took the top of the tower.
Yeah.
Then they shortened it down a little more, and finally they took the tower right off completely.
Kind of makes you laugh, like the fire chief says, well, the tower isn't any good, so they take it down. Then they build a new fire hall, and they decide they have to have a tower at the new fire hall,
Yeah.
you know, for the same reason that they didn't have to have a tower at the old fire hall.
That's right, yeah.
It doesn't make too much sense, but it was an elegant building, and those horse-drawn fire engines were... did you ever see a horse-drawn fire engine?
Good God, no. Did you?
No, I don't think I ever...
Well, how would you expect me to see
Well, I
one?
don't know, Don. I thought you might have had a reincarnation back there sometime, but it must have been exciting to attend a fire with a team of horses pulling those fire engines, or 4 horses pulling it.
The motorized vehicle overlapped the horses.
Yes,
They had
yes.
they had them both at one time, and they used to race to the fires. And the horses sometimes won too. Now, this is taken from the top of the fire hall, looking south, overlooking Center Street Baptist Church there, and much of St. Thomas, probably around 1910.
Well, now, Don, can you see Trinity Church?
You
there?
can just see Trinity
Just see
Church.
Trinity on the left, eh?
Yeah, you can just see it. I think if we just go to the next slide, you'll see a better view of the same thing.
All right, so there's Center Street Baptist, and on the left is Trinity.
Spire there.
And then you can see Knox to the right-hand side. Can
Yeah, you can see the 3 churches.
Uh-huh.
There, Trinity was built first in 1877, Center Street in 1879, and Knox in 1883. That's a beautiful picture.
Those 3 churches are also, and the dates of those 3 churches are very symptomatic of the growth and prosperity of St. Thomas. Like the 1870s and 80s was a period of tremendous advancement for St. Thomas, a big increase in wealth, a lot of money, the railway business boomed, and you have those 3 fine churches that we still have with us.
Yeah, still being used.
Yes, still being used, and
very much.
very viable congregations and very active.
I wonder if it tells us anything that the Anglicans built first, the Baptists next, and the Presbyterians later.
What religion are you, Don?
I'm United.
You're United.
Methodist.
Well, the United Church is burned down in this town. We've never had, a Center Street Baptist had a fire, didn't it? Remember the spire burned a number of years ago?
Yeah, it was struck by lightning. I think.
That's what it was,
Yeah.
yes. Because the First United Church on St. George Street had 2 disastrous fires.
Yeah, it was built in 1873.
Yeah.
This is looking north on Southwick Street, showing the fire hall on the left. And
What's the street you can see on Talbot Street, the part with the highest line there, the building? Is that the Strand?
the Strand Bowling Alley.
That building's still there.
Yeah, that was built in 1910, I believe. I'm not sure that it wasn't built by the Duncombe family. And there was an opera house.
That was another opera.
That was an opera house.
Uh-huh.
That was, I just forget the name of that opera house. But it was an opera house, and there's still a lodge room up on the top floor there.
There is.
Knights
Is
of
it
Pythias.
used? Well, the Knights of
No,
Pythias-
no, it's not being used. It was used, the Knights of Pythias, I think, were the last lodge to use that.
You know, it's a striking, you look at that building, it's a 3-story building, and the upper 2 stories are empty, eh?
Oh,
Right.
the Strand's going.
Is it going to?
It's going, yeah. It was vacant for a while.
In Talbot Street, any 3-story building, the top 2 stories are empty, and so what a merchant does, he puts one of those ghastly fronts on to hide all the windows and so on, saves them an upkeep, because they can't rent the apartments up there. They
Cheaper,
can't
it's a
rent the
tax
space.
write-off, too.
Pardon?
It's a tax write-off. Better to close it up.
Yeah, too
Didn't they
bad,
use it?
because in the 1920s and 30s, those places were just full of businesses, weren't they?
Oh, yeah, very much.
Lawyers' offices and doctors and seamsters and so on.
Now,
Well-
this is back on Talbot Street, and it's at the corner, the northwest corner of Hiawatha Street, where the Jupiter store is today.
But, Don, that whole building is
Oh, the whole thing was torn down in 1935 or 6.
1935.
Yeah, it didn't have a very long life, this building. Built in 1891.
No.
The Journal Company built it, and the Journal was there until they amalgamated with the Times and moved down the street, and the Sutherland Press ran in here for a while, and then they moved out to where they are today.
Well, it's kind of a strange thing. We saw that Times building, that little narrow building, and this was the Journal building. You'd think they would have used this one. It seems to be a bigger building.
It was newer.
Yeah.
It was a newer building, but for some reason they
Moved into the
they
Times.
moved into the other one. This wasn't an old building. You see,
No.
it was 25 years old,
No.
and a beautiful, to my way of thinking, the nicest building that was ever built on Talbot Street. Beautiful thing.
You like that mixture of the white limestone and red brick?
You still see the odd one in Toronto
Yeah.
and Hamilton,
Yeah.
but this is the only one of its kind that was built in St. Thomas,
That's the only one that was built in the red brick.
as far as I know. And
Looks like a layer cake sometimes with all that limestone, the white and the red.
pretty though,
Yes,
very elegant. But it went down very fast. They had butcher shops and fruit stands and everything else in there when it tore it down, and the tower had gone long before that. However,
Well, Don, you've lost me there. I couldn't begin to identify either of those pictures.
well, this is down Hiawatha Street, and it's a horseshoeing outfit. I don't know the name. I've forgotten the name. And a blacksmith shop. It's on the east side of Hiawatha Street, between Curtis and Talbot. And the house on the left was Billy Batty's house. And I intended to bring a picture of Billy Batty, but I forgot to. He was a character around town. He sold newspapers and a prominent member of the Salvation Army. And a real character, and he lived in that little house there.
Well, now, which little house? The one at the end of the picture, the white house?
No,
with
the one on the left-hand side. It's hard to see.
The what?
It's hard to see there, but it's on the left-hand side.
There's a little weenie house there.
Yeah, there's a little house with steps going up to
Oh,
it.
for heaven's sakes, I see it now. You're right.
He
That's
lived
in the extreme left of the picture. Yeah.
He lived in that little house. For
I see.
years he lived there.